I just got told a
Hell
couple of
yeah.
weeks ago that my song Dear Rodeo was, and I quote, "too rodeo for radio."
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today, I want to talk about Cody Johnson because he was recently on the Whiskey Riff Raff podcast, a podcast I have been on. Shout out to the Whiskey Riff guys. And he was talking about his upcoming album and his career trajectory, and also, notably, his single Dear Rodeo, which basically flopped on country radio. Now, Cody Johnson has one of the most passionate fan bases of any country star. He really embodies the Texas country persona. He's had huge albums released independently. He did sign a distribution deal with Warner Music Nashville in 2018, but as of yet, he has not had giant mainstream success. He's really just had one hit radio single called On My Way to You.
All the boats I missed, all the hill I've called.
And I thought some of his commentary on how country radio works provided a really nice vehicle to be able to talk about country radio here on the channel, because it's kind of hard to sum it all up. It's a pretty complex beast. Now look, criticism to country radio is nothing new, and honestly, I think that the industry deserves a lot of criticism. Some of the broader narratives you've probably heard talked about with country radio are the lack of songs by female artists, which has kind of broadly become known as Tomatogate. And that's when radio programmer Keith Hill compared women to the tomatoes of the country radio salad and said to take them out of rotation, which caused a huge industry-wide backlash that has really continued for the last 5-6 years. There have also been a lot of stories about the corporate overreach of massively consolidated networks of stations when they take certain artists out of rotation. Recently, that was Morgan Wallen, although he is making a recovery in country airplay. But most famously, that was the Dixie Chicks when they spoke against President Bush and were taken off all Cumulus radio stations. Some people don't realize that actually led to a full-on congressional hearing in which the CEO of Cumulus, Louis Dickey, insisted that this was not a top-down decision.
We are a confederation of 270 individual stations in 55 cities. There's nothing networked about our operation. We own and operate individual radio stations.
But as then Senator John McCain told him, it really was a top-down decision.
A decision was made at corporate headquarters that was binding on the program managers. That's what's wrong here, Mr. Dickey.
And honestly, that's a whole other can of worms about media consolidation that I think has its roots in the Telecommunications Act of 1996. So I would actually recommend reading up on that if you want to understand how we got to a place where hundreds of radio stations across the country all answer to the same centralized authority.
I was more offended, or as offended as anyone, was by the statement of the Dixie Chicks, but to restrain their trade because they exercise their right of free speech, to me, is remarkable. It is remarkable, and it's an argument. It's a strong argument about what media concentration has the possibility of doing it.
And then the most common criticism toward country radio is just the idea that it's not serving country fans, either by ignoring really popular country artists that have big fan bases but aren't getting played on the radio, or by seeming to favor collaborations that feature pop artists over collaborations with other country artists, or just by not caring about the sound of country music that so many people really love. And you can hear this sort of angst on songs like Murder on Music Row, where the Suits are chasing the almighty dollar over the sanctity of the music. And there's that same rebelliousness on Riley Green's I Wish Grandpa's Never Died when he says,
"Wish country music still got played on country radio."
But here's the thing, even Riley Green had to change the lyric to that song when it became his radio single, and it said, "I wish George Jones still got played on country radio." Because you can't take that harsh of an aim at the very people that you need to play your music. Deep down, artists really do respect country radio because they recognize its power, and that makes it difficult for them to speak about it. Radio is still the #1 method of music discovery. It's never not shocking to me when I say that in the digital age. And even songs that are really popular online don't become these big pop cultural moments without the support of radio. And the longer I've been a student of the genre, the more I've understood what corporate country radio is. And I used to get so fired up about wanting to change the state of radio, and now I just sort of understand that what it is first and foremost a business, and second, a self-reinforcing and often self-important echo chamber of industry-chosen hits that fans aren't always passionate about. And yet it's the safe, comfortable, predictable model for success that most people in Nashville are very familiar with and very much want to protect. But I would argue that there is a viable, non-radio driven pathway to success that more and more artists are demonstrating. So in this video, I just want to go through some of the little snippets of Cody Johnson's interview because I think they're great jumping off points to discuss some of this a little bit further. And before I get into that, I really do want to say that this video is not meant to be sort of riling up hate against anyone that works in the radio industry. I know a lot of people that work in radio, some of them within the corporate infrastructure and others that work for independent stations, and a lot of them are awesome. And a lot of people, especially on the corporate side, they don't have that much decision-making ability, and so just don't take this video and use it to kind of hate on your local DJ, and don't imprint the entire pressure of a corporate industry onto one individual. That wouldn't be fair. Just treat people the way you want to be treated, even if I'm gonna take some aim at the radio industry in this. The first thing Cody mentions is the traditional pathway to success for a young artist in Nashville, and here's how he lays that out.
The way that this goes is kid moves to Nashville, kid gets record deal, producer and label say, here's what you sound like, here's what you look like, let's go cut a record. Kid gets #1 hit on the radio, and now he goes and plays. Yeah, and now he goes and plays for this crowd that has no idea who he is.
Yep.
They have no idea what to expect. The show is not there because he's unpracticed and he's not seasoned. And then you hear the song, you go, oh, I've heard that song on the radio because they play it every 15 minutes. You know, and it's like,
it's so
well,
true.
so, but in a lot of instances that may have worked, and that may be somebody else's path. And like I said, I'm not talking trash.
When I said earlier that there is a familiar and safe pathway to success within Nashville, this is what I mean. This is the process by which a young artist is signed. There is music made, and generally it has kind of the edges sanded off of it. A single is chosen, and then they go to hundreds of radio stations and tour and shake hands and smile and hope that their song gets added to that radio station's playlist. Meanwhile, the label spends hundreds of thousands of dollars to promote these songs to get onto playlists, which is sort of confusing because you're not allowed to pay for play, and so sometimes you wonder where's all that money going, but we will get into that in a second. And then usually that artist will be added onto a label mate's tour. Maybe they'll be the first opener before a Dierks Bentley show at an arena, and I've been to a bunch of these shows where the first opener is just playing to maybe a third of the crowd as everyone is tailgating out in the parking lot. No one's really listening, and they're giving a speech about how their song is now number 28 on country radio, and that's sort of the life of a lot of young artists. And you know what? Ultimately, a lot of times that really works. You get artists like Billy Currington or Chris Young, who I would argue don't have the most passionate fan bases and are not looked at as these iconic artists, but they have really solid stables of hits, and now they can play to crowds of 2,000 or 3,000 when they go tour. And then there are people that start in the same way but really launch into the stratosphere, like maybe Thomas Rhett. Now this trajectory is what everyone in the industry is used to. That's why labels make songs for radio, they send artists on radio tours and give free tickets to the station, and it's why marketers and publicity people often think about country media with a radio mindset. I know I haven't had an artist as a guest on the channel in quite a while, but part of that was because sometimes working with publicity teams, you would hear them say things like, okay, yeah, we can give you 10 minutes with this artist. And you're like, but we can do this kind of more like a podcast. It's just online. And they're like, yeah, but we only give like a few minutes to radio. And I'm like, yeah, that's the issue. Like, you're not adapting to online. And it would be kind of frustrating. And I'd be like, why are you programmed to think like this? But I just think it's muscle memory. I think that's typically how the industry has run. And it is changing slowly. I also think that because the industry has built this very effective assembly line, they often want an eagerness and a buy-in from the artist to participate in that assembly line. Cody kind of mentions that mentality a little later in his interview.
Yeah.
They don't really know what to think about me because when I meet these people, they're used to the artist that maybe is not so sure of themselves and they don't really know who they are yet. They haven't experienced enough life or enough career to have that confidence. And so they're saying, please, 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 I'll do whatever I have to do to get my song. Whereas with me, it's like, hey, I really want you to play my stuff. But if you don't, thank you for coming out to the show. When you watch the show tonight, this is who I am. You know, and they don't really know what to think about that. And it's, you know, I've been told that kind of hinders me because I'm not willing to just suckle to the power teat. But it's like, and I am who I am. I can't really change that.
So you'll see artists write long letters thanking country radio in some of the country trade magazines. You'll see them thank country radio when they're up on stage.
Thank you, country. Thank you, country radio.
And then when you have someone that doesn't really play the game as well, if you have Casey Musgraves saying she doesn't want to go on the Bobby Bones show, well, that doesn't always go so well for your airplay prospects. And you might say, well, that's just because country music's a family and everyone's supposed to express gratitude and treat each other well. But I would say that in pop or rap or even in the sports world, that sort of rebelliousness is a lot more celebrated, and that unwillingness to work with the system, at the very least, is tolerated. And in corporate country radio, I don't think that's always the case. And the fact that artists like Cody Johnson, as well as Aaron Watson, that have pursued mainstream radio success, have so much trouble getting airplay, is maybe some evidence of that. The next thing Cody Johnson mentioned that I thought was really relevant was the personnel that are making the decisions about what is played on country radio.
If you listen back over the last 10 years in country music, what has happened is rock and hip hop PDs have been shoved from that world into the country music world.
Yep.
I had a conversation with someone who's very high up at a company that I'm not even going to mention, very influential, persuasive company within country music. And I said something about, you can't beat a good old Merle Haggard song. And the person said, I'll be honest with you, the only Merle Haggard song I know is like, well, he's got one about mama. And I thought, these are people making decisions in our industry, and you don't know a Merle Haggard song. And if you forget where you come from, your future's doomed.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we have to stay stagnant and everybody has to sound like Crying in Your Beer country.
Yeah.
There should be, all throughout history. I mean, Kenny Rogers did songs that sounded like pop songs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's Kenny freaking Rogers. Everybody, Alabama used drum synthesizers.
Yeah.
I'm not saying there's not room for versatility, but when you get so many people on this side that a guy like me is considered too country for radio, man, we got a problem.
So when Cody Johnson mentions PDs, he's talking about programming directors, people whose job it is to help program the playlists of radio stations. And a lot of stations outsource this work to popular programming directors that are looking at call-out scores and ratings of how many people are tuned in while in their car to certain stations. And they use that data, along with some other factors, to decide which songs should be played more or less. And I think Cody Johnson makes a great point that a lot of these folks are not true blue country fans, they didn't grow up listening to the genre, and as the radio industry continues to restructure, let's say, as it has declared junk bond status and there's fewer and fewer jobs, some of the high profile players from other segments are brought into the country space to figure out how do you get people to stop changing the channel in that 10-minute commute on the way to work. Maybe the fact that Cody Johnson is saying that a lot of these people don't have any sense of legacy about, oh, this country artist had a big career and so people will be interested in hearing his songs. If that music sounds too country to their ear, it might be a real impediment to them wanting to program it on their stations. And then that just kind of becomes a snowball effect where if something doesn't start playing, then people don't get familiar with it, so then it doesn't test well, and so then you hear less of it, and it just kind of, it's a chicken and egg situation. One of the most powerful people in all of country music, who is a VP at Cumulus named Charlie Cook, actually kind of illustrated that chicken and egg thing with one of his infamous quotes years ago. He was being interviewed by the trade magazine Country Aircheck and asked about a highly regarded piece of music he's never heard, and his answer was Sturgill Simpson. I know I'm supposed to listen to him. He's a huge act, sells out 6 shows at the Ryman in a blink, but I'm a hit-oriented listener, and I need a sing-along hook. I do not believe he is about that. To me, that quote has always been one of those moments where someone says the quiet part out loud, because he's saying he doesn't have sing-along hooks in the same sentence that he's saying he's never heard the music.
Well, now call me King Turd up here from Shit Mountain. If you want it, you can have the crown.
A lot of young artists and independent country fans were infuriated by that quote because it just made it seem like it was then impossible for anyone new or different or outside the system to ever break into it. And then even on the non-radio side, on the creative production side of things, you'll get executives that are sort of submitting to this power structure. Then CEO of Sony Music Nashville, Gary Overton, famously said, "If you're not on country radio, you don't exist." A quote that pissed off a lot of people as well, especially because Aaron Watson went to number one from completely outside the mainstream's purview that very week on the country albums chart. I remember I wrote a column about that in The Guardian, and then Bobby Bones wrote a response to that column on his Facebook that was saying, like, what are we supposed to play from Aaron Watson if he doesn't have hits? Radio has to play hits. And I was like, but that's my point. If you're not playing it, how can he have a hit? And you're saying he doesn't have a hit, so how can he be on radio? And I will say Bobby Bones deleted that post, and I think it's all like very much water under the bridge, but it just kind of illustrated my exact point, this circular thinking where radio is needed to make hits, and yet the people in charge of radio are saying that things already have to be hits to play them. And I would say, to Bobby's credit, it seems like he has noticed that exact thing himself and realized he has a little more agency in this system than that in the last few years, and he seems to really want to showcase people that he believes in. And maybe I'm being naive, and these are big promotional lineup things, but I don't think I'm that naive. When I look at thinking like that, what it demonstrates to me is an inward-facing mentality of commitment to the pipeline, commitment to the system, where labels give things directly to radio, radio plays them to support the labels, and that relationship provides an infrastructure for touring. And if I dwell too much on that, I'll get angry, because I'm ultimately approaching music as an art, and I have to remember these people are approaching it as a business, which seems very callous to music fans because music is an art. But I'm telling you, you talk to a lot of programming directors, they're data guys, you know? They are data guys, and they're not going to understand your argument about how this song is so beautiful. They're like, well, it did not test well in Tahoma. And you're like, and even though that mentality frustrates me so much, the older I get, the more I understand it. And then Cody talked about his song Dear Rodeo, which is certainly a fan favorite. It even got a really great remix that featured Reba McEntire, and why it didn't take off at country radio.
You know, we were discussing yesterday, or a couple of days ago, actually, we were talking about what singles or what songs off of my new record we would consider singles. And myself and one representative from the label, my producer and my A&R guy, we're all kind of talking. And my producer, Trent Willman, says, if they're already not going to play it, why not release what we want?
Right.
You know, I just got told a couple of weeks ago that my song Dear Rodeo was, and I quote, too rodeo for radio. Because it reminded people of because apparently the word rodeo reminds people of cruelty to animals.
Too rodeo for radio. That's a great little soundbite that embodies that sort of outsiders not being embraced by the system mentality that I'm kind of arguing throughout this whole video. But I think there's a broader discussion to have around Dear Rodeo specifically, and the fact that it peaked at number 34 on the chart and it never climbed the way so many other singles do. Now, the thing that you've got to understand about the radio run of songs is that labels are obsessed with their artists getting number one songs. They want those bragging rights more than anything. And they will arrange for elaborate promotional campaigns to continue to slowly make incremental gains on country radio just to eke out a number one. In the last year, we've seen the record for longest climb to number one on country radio broken twice. First by Jimmy Allen with Make Me Want To, which took 58 weeks to get to the top. And then with Travis Dennings After a Few, which took 65 weeks to climb to the number one spot. Like I mentioned, labels have huge radio promotion budgets, and where does that money go when they spend a lot of money to get a number one? What does that mean? Here are the things that I know it means, and I will say this, there's a lot that I don't know. What I do know is that they pay staffers, radio promotion folks, and their job is to call up programming directors and big radio groups and sort of grease the wheels and make sure they know, hey, we would love for you to play this song. And maybe they might be able to sort of negotiate without any real money exchanged certain things. Like, hey, what if we gave you 10 tickets that you could give away over the course of the next week for this artist? Or, hey, what if when this artist is in your town, he could play at the iHeart Festival for free? Now look, payola, which is the practice of paying money directly to radio for airplay, is illegal. But some people would argue that things like that are just a way around it. Much like in the medical sales world, you can't pay a doctor to prescribe a medicine, but hey, you could have a training seminar for how to administer this medicine in Hawaii for a week. The seminar is only going to be 3 hours, but we're not paying you to prescribe it, but come on down to Hawaii, bring your folks. And that sounds good to you, right? What's even weirder to me, though, is when you observe what seems to be sort of these coordinated, scheduled number ones within the industry. Oftentimes, if you look through the trade magazines, you'll see big ads that say Max spins, and they will provide a date to programming directors of here's when we as a label would like you to make our song number one. And sometimes it just seems like songs with very little passion that aren't even charting high up on Spotify or iTunes just get their turn at number one because that was somehow the weird tacit agreement between the labels and radio. And if you really study the charts, you'll definitely see evidence from time to time of songs that seem to be falsely puffed up and getting way disproportionate airplay than clearly the stations would be doing if they were just making all their own decisions. And you'll have a song like Rascal Flatts' How They Remember You that climbs all the way to number 2 on the chart. And it takes months and months and months and months to get there, and then just in 1 week, it drops all the way to number 23. And it is played over 5,000 times less week over week. It loses over 18,000 points, and then it just disappears altogether from the chart the next week. You don't have to be a genius to feel like that looks fishy. Like, why would a song like that be getting so much airplay if clearly there wasn't enough passion to keep it around when whatever promotional effort was going into it suddenly stops? Sometimes you do get a big, huge, organic hit. You get something like Luke Combs's Forever After All, or you get something like Gabby Barrett's song The Good Ones, where they march up the chart and then they stick around. There's passion. They don't fall off a cliff like that Rascal Flatts song. But even if your song goes from number 1 to number 2 to number 3, if it drops for 2 weeks in a row, you are taken off the chart altogether. You are called what's recurrent, so you're just removed. So a few weeks ago, Gabby Barrett actually still would have been number 4 on the chart, but she's nowhere on the chart because, she went recurrent. And that's not a huge deal to me, but I do think it shows that there is this desire to get as many songs into the number 1 spot as possible. And as consumers, it's like, why do we care? But again, the industry cares. The labels want to be able to say that they had a lot of number 1 songs, and so that's kind of the system that exists. I recently learned that in the pop music world, on pop airplay, songs aren't considered recurrent until they are out of the top 10 altogether, in order to not let there be kind of these fluke number 1s that just appear out of nowhere on pop radio. But all that said, I actually don't feel like I have a very grim outlook when it comes to country music and country music that has the potential to reach the mainstream. I've almost just laid out why I have kind of increasingly tuned out big corporate radio stations. I'm not saying they're not important on any level. I'm not saying they don't have an incredible legacy, but in a lot of those situations, there is no reason for me to call my local radio station and say, hey, will you please play this song that I love? Because they're not even running themselves. A lot of their programming is syndicated, or their playlist is coming from a consultant that their parent company is paying.
Like you said, if I would have gotten a record deal and all of a sudden you don't see me in a hat and boots anymore,
exactly.
that's selling out.
And it's
if
drum
I come to
loops
Nashville and I fire my band of 10 years, that's selling out to me. We've always said, and I'm not talking trash, but we've always said we don't run tracks. We'll never run tracks. A couple nights ago, we were playing a show and a bolt broke on one of the drum risers and the drums fell off. And I never stopped playing. And I told my crowd, I said, we don't stop for anything. And they thought that was, but if I'd have had tracks running, those drums would have kept on playing and somebody would have noticed that. It's like that word authenticity out the window. It's like, I want to be known as that guy. And it might be a harder road, as you guys know, from, like you said, your background, from where you come from. It is a harder, less traveled road, but I think it's just more fulfilling. It's more, in the long run, it's more fulfilling. And it might be a harder road, as you guys know, from, like you said, your background, from where you come from. It is a harder, less traveled road, but I think it's just more fulfilling. It's more, in the long run, it's more fulfilling. For me, it was just the opposite. Let's go out and get fans.
Earn them.
Let's go out and earn these fans. That way, no matter where we go in life, they're going to be there. They know that their product that they're buying, me, is there. I'm always going to deliver. I'm always going to deliver that same thing, and I'm not going to be wavered by the trends. And it's like,
and so the decisions are happening so far upstream at such a corporate level than I used to believe that they were. But the good news is there are smaller systems that I can wrap my head around, and there are independent radio stations and really small group radio stations. Here where I live, we have the Charlottesville Radio Group that owns 5 stations, and I can actually call the DJ and ask a song, and they actually do play people that are local to my town, and it's just cool. I mean, it's beautiful. It's an awesome way of showcasing music. And I know down in Texas, they have 95.9 The Ranch, which is iconic for helping to launch the careers of so many of our favorite Texas artists. And you've also got Coke FM that does the same thing, and they've got their own festival. And, you know, when you take stuff to an independent level, a lot of the beauty and magic of radio is still there. It's just, I used to only understand it as like iHeartRadio or something like that. These big forces that are really tight with the labels where you really can see the system at play. And I would love it if that system sometimes backed up some of my favorite people. Like Cody Johnson obviously wants in. He is working with Warner Music Nashville on this distribution deal because, look, he would love to get that mainstream radio play. But if he doesn't, I think he is a great demonstration of what independent music can do. That guy can sell out the rodeo. That guy has one of the most passionate fan bases, Kojo Nation, ever. That guy sells thousands of bottles of cologne. He built all of that independently, and it might be a longer, slower game, but he is in control of his career. And I think even people on major labels can have more of that independent mindset, and I think Casey Musgraves would be the best example of that. She started off with a top 10 hit in Merry Go Round, but for the most part, she has not had any country radio success. But tell me that a lot of these guys that have 5 #1 singles and are still the first opener on a big stadium tour for Jason Aldean aren't envious of the respect that she has and the fact that people love her music and listen to every word and see the artistry in it. She played a longer game, and yeah, it took her a long time to break out, but she is reaping the benefits of being a singular artist now, and she did it without the help of country radio. I think my favorite artists are people like Dierks Bentley, Eric Church, Miranda Lambert that can play the game enough, that understand the importance that radio has and to provide it with hits, but also do have enough of an independent mindset that they throw a curveball at you every now and again. And the best news of all is that in the digital age, the access to music has been completely decentralized. I can find it anywhere I want. I can go directly to the source and follow the artists I like and support them and buy their merch and go to their shows, subscribe to them on YouTube or on Patreon or whatever, and just get their work that I believe in. And as I internalize that reality, it helps me see stuff like radio as the business that it is, and it helps me tune out the kind of corrupt voting blocks within country award shows. And so I don't know. I'm just having this whole mindset change right now in life where I realize that there's already a lot of good stuff that I do support, and there's a reason why I don't support that. And I guess I just believe on some level that if people like Cody Johnson or Casey Musgraves just tell the truth and make good music, ultimately the audiences will find them, and the people that want to make money will find a way to work with them. So go check out that Cody Johnson interview and let me know your thoughts about country radio down below. I'd love to know what you think about this whole subject. I don't know if this is a good video or not, but I've wanted to say a lot of this stuff and haven't found a venue to say it in, so here you go. Love y'all. Bye.